Use rune stones and collect your adventure cards to build your character's story? This is Call to Adventure. Do you want to learn how to play the game?
In this video, we're going to take you through the full rules of the game, and if you stay tuned till the end, you can pick up some tips and strategies along the way. Coming up. Hi, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from Meeple University, bringing you a variety of quality board game videos. On this channel we do a lot of overview, playthrough, vlog and how to play, just like this one.
So if you're new here, please consider subscribing to us and do hit the bell so you'll be notified when we post new videos.
Now, let's get to the rules of Call to Adventure, designed by Johnny O'Neill and Christopher O'Neill, and published by Brotherwise Games.
Call to Adventure is a character building game, and what we'll be describing here is the competitive mode, which plays 2 to 4 players. Each player's character begins the game described by 3 cards, an origin, a motivation, and a hidden destiny. And through the game, players will give those characters more experiences to broaden the depth of the characters and earn victory points. Over the course of the game, players' characters will experience triumphs, shown in the white diamond, tragedies, shown in the black diamond, gain a variety of other experience, which are represented by these icons and these red gems. All of these can be worth victory points in equal measure. Once one player has gained a total of 12 cards into his or her tableau, the game will end and the player with the highest score wins. Additionally, you'll have put together a character and you'll be able to tell that character's story in narrative form. When you open up your game box, you'll find these 9 decks of cards. The ones showing the skull are used for solo and cooperative play, and we won't need them for the moment. Shuffle each of the other decks. Deal each player 2 origin cards, 2 motivation cards, and 2 destiny cards. Each player may look at the cards that he or she has been dealt, and then chooses 1 origin, 1 motivation, and 1 destiny to keep in play, discarding the others. The origin and motivation are placed face up on the player board, the destiny is placed face down. Each player is dealt 1 hero card, these are the cards with the white triangle, not the black triangle, and each player takes 3 experience gems. Each player takes a corruption tracker and places it on the blank space of the corruption track. This has a sun side and a moon side. It doesn't really matter which side you place it on. Then lay out the common supply of cards like this. The hero and anti-hero cards simply stay in packs. The Act 1, 2 and 3 cards are put in decks, and then 4 cards are dealt out from each in a 2 or 3 player game, and 5 from each in a 4 player game. At the start of the game, the Act 1 cards are face up, the others are face down. You're now ready to play. On each turn, a player attempts to take exactly 1 of the face-up cards from the common display and add it to his or her character's story. Some types of cards can be gained without risk. Other types of cards require the player to undergo a challenge, rolling rune tiles in order to see whether or not they gain the card. After the player has gained, or attempted to gain, but failed to gain, 1 card from the display, the card is replaced and play passes to the next player. There are 4 different types of story cards that a player may encounter: traits, challenges, adversaries, and allies. A card which has 2 titles, one at the top and one at the bottom, is a challenge card. All other cards have only a single title. If under that title it says adversary, then it's an adversary card. If it states ally, it's an ally card. And if it has no other text, then it is a trait card. Now we'll talk about how to interact with each of these cards in sequence. To gain a trait card, a player must meet the requirements printed in the text box at the bottom of that trait card. So in this case, the player must either have a Constitution rune icon, which the player does have visible on this settler card, or spend 1 experience gem. If the player meets the requirements, he or she takes the card and slides it into the top of his or her current Act card on the player board. At the start of the game, this will be Act 1 under the Origin card. The title of the card you just gained plus any icons shown next to the title should remain visible, as you'll now be able to claim these for getting future traits or in future challenges, which we'll see shortly. Then replace the card and play passes to the next player. There are several different types of icons that you might encounter on the top of your trait cards or indeed any other cards. Rune icons, which will be one of these 6 coloured icons, will help you in further challenges, which we'll see shortly. The black and grey icons are known as story icons, and these can be comboed together to be worth victory points at the end of the game. These blue icons represent hero and anti-hero cards, and when you play one of these cards into your story, you can immediately gain a hero card or an anti-hero card into your hand. Your hand size is unlimited. These cards may also give you triumph points or tragedy points, and both of these convert equally into final victory points at the end of the game. Next, we'll go through how to face a challenge. On your turn, choose the challenge that you want to face. Let's say it's this one. We'll put it down here for the moment so we can zoom in on what's happening. What you'll be trying to do is to beat this challenge in order to get it into your story tableau. To do this, go through the following steps. First, check the difficulty of the challenge. That's this number in the top left corner. Then, choose whether you're going to go for the top path or the bottom path. This can have 2 impacts. Firstly, the path you choose determines which icons you'll gain into your tableau if successful. Secondly, if you see this +1 icon to the left of the path you've chosen, that increases the difficulty of the challenge by 1. So here you could calm your attacker at a difficulty of 3, or defend your family at a difficulty of 4. As you can see, you'll usually get a greater reward with more icons if you choose the harder challenge. Then, to face the challenge, you're going to take a number of rune tiles, cast them on the table, and attempt to score a number equal or higher than the difficulty of the challenge you've attempted. To understand this, we need to look at the runes in more detail. There are 24 rune tiles in 8 different types. Those showing black text are the core runes. Those showing coloured text are specific runes which match the ones that are printed on your player board. And there are 3 black coloured runes known as dark runes. Each has a different symbol on each side, and when you come to do a challenge, you're going to take a certain number of runes, shake them up and throw them on the table, and then, based on the symbols that show up, count up your score for that challenge. Firstly, in all challenges you will always throw the 3 core runes. Those are the ones with the black text. Then you will also throw coloured runes based on the rune symbols that you've collected in your tableau that match this stripe down the left hand side of the card. So in this case, based on the player's tableau, he or she has 2 red runes, 1 purple rune and 1 blue rune. This particular challenge can only have red and purple runes, and so the player could gain those matching runes based on the number of symbols he or she has collected. Then finally, the player may add 1 or more dark runes to his or her collection by spending experience tokens. Each experience token spent will allow 1 dark rune up to a maximum of 3. Once you've chosen how many runes you're going to throw, gather them all in your hands, shake them together, and drop them onto the table. Then count up the score. A vertical slash of any colour is worth 1 point in the challenge. A coloured rune icon is worth 2. A blank side is worth 0, and a moon on a dark rune is also worth 2, but it forces the player to move 1 step down on the corruption track. So this full set of rolls will be worth a total of 10, a very high roll. And this would be more than enough to defeat this challenge, which the player would then add to his or her story. The card will slide in either the top or the bottom depending on the path that was chosen, and its icons are now available for use exactly as the trade icons were. If your throw was unsuccessful, discard the card you were attempting. It will no longer be available for other players to attempt, but gain 1 experience gem. With failure comes experience. The third type of card you may encounter is an adversary, and adversaries work in almost exactly the same way as a challenge. The difference is that instead of having 2 paths to choose from, you only have one. It's usually more powerful, and it will have some text effect that impacts your challenge against that adversary. In this case, for example, its difficulty is 6, but for a player who is at least 1 level of corruption, he or she will have +1 against the challenge. The selection of coloured runes works the same way as a challenge, with the 2 that are shown on the left-hand side of the card being the ones that can be used against that adversary. The final type of card is an ally, and allies work differently to the rest of the cards. When a player draws an ally at the end of his or her turn, instead of placing it into the empty space, he or she chooses a challenge or adversary already on the board and applies the ally to that challenge. This adds +1 difficulty to that challenge, both the top and bottom paths. The ally must be placed on a challenge in the same act, and a single challenge cannot have more than 1 ally at a time. Then the player refills with the next card from the deck. When a player later defeats that challenge, he or she still slots the challenge into his or her story, but places the ally beside his or her player board. The player now has access to the ally's icons and to a text bonus effect printed at the bottom of the card. And so that covers the basics of a player turn. You can either gain 1 trait, face 1 challenge, or face 1 adversary. In addition to that 1 main action, there are some other things you can do on your turn. Once per turn, you can spend an experience gem in order to discard a card and replace it before taking your turn. You can use any number of text effects printed on cards that are face up, and these will be your origin and motivation cards as well as any allies you might have collected. And you can play any number of hero or anti-hero cards for their text effect. When you play one of these cards, play it face up into a common collection, as each of these will be worth 1 victory point at the end of the game for those that you've played. The caveat on playing hero and anti-hero cards is your position on the corruption track. You'll see these icons here representing the hero and anti-hero cards, and your marker must be in a position which corresponds to the type of card you want to play. If you take too much corruption, you won't be allowed to play hero cards anymore, and if you get too much virtue, you won't be allowed to play anti-hero cards anymore. A couple of other notes about the corruption track while we're here. You'll see that there are some victory points printed next to the different spaces on the corruption track, and you will gain or lose these at the end of the game. You'll see that a little bit of corruption will be worth some victory points for you for giving your character a hard edge, but if you go too far down the corruption track, you're going to start to lose points. The primary way that you'll move down the track is by rolling moons on dark runes in challenges. And note that once you've hit the bottom of the track, you're no longer allowed to cast dark runes. Moving back up the track is quite difficult, as you have to find specific cards which will grant you a sun as a reward, and there aren't all that many of those. Thus, managing your position on the corruption track is a key part of the strategy of the game. A few more notes about runes and challenges. Among the 3 coloured runes of any given colour, you'll see that one has got 3 dots printed on it, on both sides. When a player has 1 or 2 rune icons of a certain colour, he or she may only take the ones without the dots. When the player adds a 3rd symbol of that colour, then he or she includes the one with dots in the runes thrown. With a 4th matching symbol, the player would still only throw 3 runes of that colour. The runes without dots have a 2-point symbol on one side and a 1-point symbol on the other. The runes with dots show a 2-point symbol on one side and some other benefit on the other side. So now let's look at those benefits. A player who throws one of these symbols in a challenge would get to gain an experience gem, with 1 per symbol thrown. A player who threw one of these symbols would get to draw a hero card. Throwing one of these symbols would give the player an anti-hero card, and throwing this symbol, which is present on one of the core runes, allows the player to draw either a hero or anti-hero card depending on his or her preference. None of these symbols are worth any points in the challenge itself, so while throwing them gives some extra benefits, it will not help you to win the challenge. Once one player has added a 3rd card to a certain act, and that means having a total of 4 including the starting card, then the game progresses to the next act. Flip over all of the act cards in the market for the new act. A player who has completed Act 1 can now only add cards to the Act 2 column and can only take cards from the Act 2 row. The player who is still on Act 1 continues adding cards to Act 1 until he or she has a total of 4, including the starting card. However, this player may take cards from Act 1 or Act 2 and put them into the Act 1 column. It is not until he or she has completed the Act 1 column that he or she is prevented from taking Act 1 cards any longer. Each player must fill all of his or her Act 1 column before moving on to the Act 2 column. The progression from Act 2 to Act 3 works in exactly the same way once one player has completely filled the Act 2 column. Note that the player's Act 3 Destiny card still stays face down until the end of the game. It is only known to the player who owns it. Once one player has completely filled his or her Act 3 column, again which means 4 cards including the Destiny card, then the end of the game is triggered. Each other player takes one more turn and then the game is over and proceed to endgame scoring. Players gain points from the following sources. They'll gain 1 point for every hero or anti-hero card played, in this case 5. They'll gain 1 point for every leftover experience token collected, in this case 7. They'll gain points for position on the corruption track, in this case 4. They'll gain points for any triumph or tragedy icons shown among the icons of the cards in the story, so in this case it adds up to 15. Next, players score points for story icons. Those are these little square ones in grey and black. Specifically, players are going to score sets. So any set of 2 matching story icons is worth 2 points. Any set of 3 matching story icons is worth 4 points. And a set of 4 or more matching story icons is worth 8 points. Finally, each player reveals his or her Destiny card, and this will give some additional victory points for a certain objective. In this case, the player gains an extra point for every red and blue rune that's been collected, and for each different story icon in his or her story. So meeting the targets on this particular card would be worth a total of 8 points to the player. The player with the highest score wins. Finally, irrespective of who's won the game, each player has put together a character from start to finish, from origin story through to Destiny. You've got a series of story cues in front of you, and you can now engage in some storytelling with each other. The game can be played in a solo or cooperative mode in which you will face a single adversary who will use these skull cards to apply some additional penalties to you when you fail challenges. We won't go through the full rules for this mode in this video. Note also that some of the anti-hero cards in the game have a take that effect which impacts other players. These can be distinguished by a small skull shown in the bottom middle of the card, and if you don't want to play with this sort of card, you can simply remove all the skull cards from your anti-hero deck.
And that's how to play Call to Adventure. We hope that you enjoyed the video and we hope that you enjoy playing.
If you'd like to learn a little more about our views on the game, we do have a review and you can click on the link in the description below to check that out.
If you enjoyed this video, please let us know by hitting the like button. Write your questions and feedback in the comment sections below. You can also join our Facebook group, Meeple University Community, to share your love of board games.
And finally, if you'd like to be among the first notified on what's new from Meeple University, please consider subscribing to our channel and click on the Meeple up in the corner to do so, and do hit the bell for notifications.
Until next time.